Hey, it's Brooklyn Lou the Skeptic, and I got a very special guest today. You know, when you're on YouTube, you meet some really interesting people, and that's one of the beauties of the internet and the beauties of YouTube. And I got to meet this fellow. One day I was doing a live, and I was debating someone, and he came into the discussion. And he had this argument that was just like brilliant and phenomenal. And I was like, whoa, yeah, whatever he says, that makes sense. But I want to bring him on so we could talk to him. He's a agnostic when it comes to religion. And his name is Scott Williamson. He has a really good show or a channel called The Discussion. And I want to bring him in and introduce him. So here is Scott. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Hey, what's happening, my friend?
Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you, man.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about your background because I'm just getting to know you better myself. And I want to find out where you started out in terms of religious thought. And just a little bit of background about yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. So, I was born here in the South. I've lived just about everywhere in the country and even abroad. And, but basically I came up in a family that was not very religious per se. Like it was more like a cultural Christians. My mom and dad, they consider themselves Christians, but they never really went to church. They never really, it was just holidays and, sometimes prayers when family comes, extended family may visit, whatever, but not really that serious. So no inculcation was done to us kids, right? But I did have exposure to religion because my grandmother was very, very religious. So as a kid, I had to go spend the summers with my grandma. And of course, she'd make us, do everything, get up early in the morning, do yard work, shell peas, everything you can imagine, but also to go to church. So we'd have to go to church sometimes. And she was pretty strict, and she talked a lot about Jesus and the Bible. She was really into the religion, very puritanical. And so we were very much exposed to it, but it was more like, oh, Lord, here we go again type of thing, But as I got a little older, talking to other kids who had other backgrounds, stuff like that, you start thinking about, God and the God question and religion. What does all this stuff mean? Because I'm hearing so many competing ideas in public life, like, all on TV, you hear about religion and God and preachers and this and that, but you also hear, science and evolution and, these debates, creation versus evolution. And they're coming up at a time, say like the 70s and 80s, where these things weren't very, there was no internet. People didn't really have that much information to go by. So you were just kind of at the mercy of any book you may purchase and read about, or what the TV may talk about, some talking head may discuss, or what your local preacher was talking about. And most people seem to go along with your preacher or, whatever the TV was kind of promoting. And, and sometimes people were looking at religion as an escape route to life, because look, you were there in the 80s, 70s, 80s. Life wasn't as easy it was now. Life is so much easier now. Everybody's got it made, comparatively in many certain areas. Back then, you had to work, you had, a lot harder. You didn't have, women didn't have the same workplace rights. They were paid very much underpaid. They had to work really hard. Men, it was much more patriarchal back then, even though it wasn't that long ago, really. But it was much more patriarchal back then. There was just certain things you could say, you couldn't, there was none of this wokeness. There was none of this politeness, this etiquette that was sort of formally produced in society as it is today. Back then, it was just kind of like the Wild Wild West compared to now, and I'm sure it was even worse back in the 60s and 50s and 40s or whatever. And so
Yeah.
it's a different world,
Well, did you grow up in the 70s?
Yeah, so I was born, late 60s. And so when I was a kid, I came up in the 70s. And then the 80s, I was a teenager. And that's probably when I started to really form these questions about gods. And, because I've always been wired up a little different than the rest of my family in a way where I would ask a lot of questions about God and stuff, philosophy, science. I was just really into that kind of topics,
I grew up in the 70s as well. I was born in 63, but the years I remember the most of was the 70s. And I remember when women's lib was a thing, was like a big thing. I recall the Helen Reddy song, I am woman, hear me roar. And it was the time when America was really looking at these issues.
Yes.
And, we probably similar age. I think I'm a little older. Yeah. But, I was a 70s and 80s guy growing up. That was what I consider my formative years, was the 70s. And in 80s, I became an adult, Right. So what religion did you find or did you adhere to at any point during your upbringing?
Yeah, so good question. So I was exposed to the Southern Baptist Church in the 70s and 80s through my grandma. And so it's pretty much all I knew is Protestantism. And I really didn't study religion all that much. I just had these questions as a kid. I moved into an apartment with my high school sweetheart. Once we graduated, we kind of moved out, got our own place, and started playing house, man, and then by our door, because we kind of lived at that time, I'm just a young guy. I didn't make hardly any money. We didn't make hardly any money. So we were living in like a rundown neighborhood in Virginia, and so we had Jehovah's Witnesses always coming by, and there was a Kingdom Hall right up the street from us. And so they came knocking at the door, and I had all these questions going on at the time. I was just, at that time, I was a different person. I had a lot of issues, a lot of anger problems, a lot of confrontational issues with people, and as a young, dumb kid. And I was looking for something that could maybe change me out of that. Now, I know my girlfriend at the time she was like, man, you got to really calm down, man. You've got to really get it together somehow. And I didn't know how to do it. And I always thought of myself as a good person, even though my actions may have shown different. But when Jehovah's Witnesses came by, they explained to me, how Adam and Eve created the fall. And, this is why we have this inclination to do bad things. And as a young kid, this stuff just started making sense to me for whatever reason. It just like, oh, really? So that's why I'm an asshole. So they're like, yeah, you've inherited sin, and the only way you can get out of sin, because the thing is, because we sin, we die, and everybody dies. So this explains death. So if you don't want to die and you want to live forever, you're going to have to believe in Jesus. And Jesus, it was God's son who he sent to die for you. And if you just confess that I'm a sinner and I need Jesus to forgive me, then you can live forever, man. Live forever right here on earth. The great tribulation's coming. You'll be part of the great crowd, what they call the great crowd, that will inherit the earth. The meek shall inherit the earth, and you'll live forever, just like Adam and Eve were meant to live forever, and them and their children. And then the world will be judged by 144,000 different kind of Christians that meet a certain criteria. They're elect. The elect is what they call them in the New Testament. And these ones would go to heaven and judge the earth. After 1,000 years, you know, we could live forever. Then we're going to have this great war called the Gog and Magog. The world ends. Satan is thrown into the lake of fire. Sin and death is thrown into the lake of fire. So death is no more. Neither is mourning nor pain. The former things have come to pass. So you now can live forever on the earth as long as you maintain your loyalty like Job did. And you can live forever with God, and Jesus is the king. His kingdom is eternal, it's heavenly, and all this kind of stuff. And I just believed it. They showed me the prophecies in the Old Testament, Isaiah, Ezekiel, all of these different things. And at that time, I was really taken. I was like, wow, it's so weird how hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus came to the earth, he was foretold. And it's so clear to me, the way they talk, it's so clear that Jesus actually existed. These things were prophecies, and never questioned any of it, just went along with it. And as you know, time went on and I got a little older and I started getting in the workforce and talking to different people like atheists and different people. They start asking me these questions that I couldn't answer because, you know, I'm like this real zealous type Christian guy. You know, I'm like knocking on people's door, arguing with pastors and priests and anybody I can. I used to love it. So I'd go to work, but then I met atheists who didn't believe in God at all, which blew my mind. I'm like, how do you not believe in God? That's like the dumbest thing in the world I could imagine. Like, how is that even possible? How do you think we got here? Like, are you stupid? Like, for me, it just blew my mind, you know?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
They ask these questions and they use, you know, this one guy's name was Ken. I'll never forget him. And he started doing street epistemology before street epistemology was even a thing, you know? So he's like asking me these Socratic questions to kind of like show me where my beliefs were unfounded, just to myself. Just, I couldn't answer them. So it just revealed to me, hey, you don't have strong epistemology, which epistemology is the theory of knowledge, like how we come to know things. And so it dawned on me, wow, I really didn't think that deeply about this stuff. And here I am committing all my time, all my money, all my emotion into this belief. And this belief is actually unfounded. And that blew my mind again. And I'm like, what is going on? So the guy gave me books. He goes, look, I'll take your watchtowers and books and I'll read them as long as you read the books I give you. And I'm like, okay. So he gave me these books like, you know, at the time it was like Ayn Rand and other books, you know, science and, you know, different books about culture and how it formed and things of that nature. And these books just opened me up to a whole new way of looking at the world. And I'm like, wow. So you mean to tell me that humans actually created this? You mean there were other religions before, you know, Judaism? You mean this stuff was they're lying to me? And it just blew my mind. And you know, when I went to question my elders, you know, the people at my congregation, they couldn't really provide a satisfying answer. And in fact, they sort of kind of made me feel bad for asking the questions, you know, and that turned me off. And I was like, well, why are they not wanting to answer my question? Why is the question bad? Because I'm just this naive little 20-year-old kid, you know. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just asking questions. I didn't understand that this is a business. This is their whole thing is the repeat customer. You know, it's like they need to keep you in, and then they need you to have a wife and kids so that they too can add to the numbers, and it grows the congregation and grows the worldwide organization. And I didn't really put that together. But when I did, I started to feel a little bit used and a little bit betrayed. And even if it was unknowingly, because I understood that they're just as deceived as I was, but it was enough for me to leave. And eventually I left, and it was the hardest thing I ever did at that point. And, you know, me and my wife split up not long after that. That was my first wife. And we just fell apart. Like my whole world just fell apart. I had to start all over. I had to really find a new way to deal with life. And I was kind of angry. So I was one of these angry atheist types, you know, and I wasn't that philosophically savvy. I wasn't spiritual minded, really. I was just told what to think. And I thought that was spirituality, and that was being honest. And no, none of that was true.
So, Scott, let me ask you, when you were in that phase, it was Jehovah Witness, right? Kingdom Hall, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, right?
Yep.
That information, the various books that you're told to read. And were you totally like sold out where you were going door to door with them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was going door to door more than you had to. So, you know, people were only supposed to go door to door maybe on a Saturday. I was volunteering on Monday through Friday to do it. I was just grabbing people, partners. Hey man, let's do it on Monday, man. Let's get together after work and let's go do some door to door. And it was like my thing, man. I just loved it.
You know, when I grew up, my neighbors across the street were JWs. And, you know, I got familiar a little bit with what they believed. It was different than what I would believed, you know, like one of the big differences I remember, and I'm sure you know, is they believe there's going to be a paradise here on earth, right? Mm-hmm. That's where your ultimate destiny is if you're a good JW, right? You're going to live in paradise on earth. So they didn't really believe in heaven like I did. Right. So there was a difference there. And of course, they didn't believe in the Trinity. Right. I always was, you know, the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, you know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the JWs were always, you know, no, that's not right. You know, they believed in Jehovah as the only sole God, no Trinity. Right. You know, that's some of the stuff I remember. And of course, they were strict religiously. Like, they were not allowed to do a lot of things. I remember that. You know,
correct.
Like dancing was a big deal in my day. You know, if the Jehovah Witnesses got together and they danced a little bit, some of the adults would be a little upset over that, you know?
Yeah.
Or the chaperoning thing, like, well, let's have the grown-ups here to watch.
To watch and make sure. That's right.
What is going on over here? So it had a Puritan type of thing going on. And what do they call that in Christianity when purity culture? Yeah. They were into that I remember. So.
Yes, they wanted to set themselves apart from Christendom, as they called it. Like they could, how easily you can point to the hypocrisy in the church, and you can point to these televangelists who get caught in scandals and stuff. And so one of the things that they wanted to make a point towards other people was like, we're not like them. We live what we say. Like when the Bible says, bad associations spoil useful habits. So we take that serious. That means we don't really associate with people who are not of Jehovah's people. We don't fraternize with other churches. We don't go to their church. We don't ever fellowship with them in any kind of way. Not because we hate them. It's just that we're trying to protect our own spiritual. It's like God called it spiritual fornication. Like the way they interpreted Revelation, how you see the harlot upon the beast, riding the beast. Well, the beast,
the whore of Babylon, right?
Yeah, the whore of Babylon, right? And so Babylon is representative of all the kingdoms. Like it has the 10-headed beast, right? And each head represents like a different country throughout history. And so the harlot that rides upon them is the church, the false church that rode or aligned itself with the political powers throughout history, like from Rome on up. And so you see, the harlot kind of represents Judaism, like where Judaism kind of aligned itself with, Babylon, the literal Babylon, the Greeks, when they were in control, the Rome, and you can count it on up. And it went to 10, and they were like, the 10th one is America, because it's the 10th nation. It's the one after the UK or England, which was the 9th head. And then if you look at number 10, it's like supposed to be America. And so who is the harlot riding on the beast nowadays, like with America as the 10th head? Who is that? Well, it's the same. It's that same whore. It's that same spiritual fornicator. It's the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was the harlot, along with the Protestants and all these other. But then Jehovah's Witnesses within Revelation were interpreted as the three witnesses. So if you read Revelation, there's these three witnesses that go throughout all of the earth, and they torture people like scorpions. Like they say, they're like scorpions, and they're torturing the world with their message. And what that means is that God's true people, the witnesses, are going out into the world to spread a message that hurts people because they don't want to hear the truth. So it goes back to like Isaiah, who begged God, can I just swallow this scroll that's bitter, rather than, expose it to because he didn't want to have to tell this harsh message to his people. He was just begging Yahweh, please let me swallow this scroll. And so we're entrusted as Jehovah's Witnesses to not do that, but to actually expose the church, expose the kings of the world, and be that witnesses. And then Revelation also talks about how the three witnesses are killed in the street in front of everybody. And that represents the persecution of the Jehovah's Witnesses, which happened throughout history, like with World War II in particular, when they were putting concentration camps with the Jews and the homosexuals and people like that. And so Jehovah's Witnesses were killed, not just there, but in any nation, and they, we had watchtower studies about different nations that are persecuting Jehovah's people. And so those were the three witnesses. We were then, but then after we are killed, we come back to life after some time when the king comes back, Jesus, and he destroys our enemies. He destroys everyone, and he lets us into the new, like you said, the paradise on earth, which he calls in Revelation is called the great crowd. Enter into the paradise, like a great crowd. These are the three witnesses. Now they're represented as a great multitude, and whereas the 144,000 are Jehovah's Witnesses too, but they're in heaven ruling with Jesus as judges. So they won the reward. So you hear like in the New Testament where Paul wrote a letter to Timothy, and he talks about don't give up the race. You're almost there. You will be glorified in heaven with Jesus, and even unto death, and blah, blah, blah. Well, these are the folks, these martyrs that ascend to heaven like Jesus did. But most people are the earthly class, if you will, the paradise people. Yeah. Yeah.
Now they believed in soul sleep, right? You were asleep until you
God
were
calls you. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to know, like, now, where you're at now, does that seem like really arrogant? Because to me, like, all religion is very arrogant. It's like we are special,
Yeah.
So when you were a JW, you must have felt, you were pretty special, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I've done with that is to try to learn from that experience and kind of see the arrogance as my pitfall, to where I'd never want to be in that position again. So not only would I not join another arrogant religion, but I would not even personally consider myself a know-it-all ever again. Like, I've been wrong before many, 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 many times. So it's demonstrated to me personally that I'm not omniscient. I don't know everything, and I can be wrong, believe it or not. And so I kind of take that to heart and say, the only things that really needs to come out of my mouth are things that either I know and things that are helpful, because even things I know, if they're not helpful to someone else, then what's the point? Like, unless I'm a mean person, and I'm not trying to be a mean person, either. So, I do feel like truth is important. Like, I think that truth is important. I also believe that peace of mind is even more important than trying to find the truth. Because one of the things that I've come to realize is that just by studying science, and anybody knows this, is that we don't really have direct access to reality anyways, because we're always learning, and we're even backtracking on some of our knowledge, and we're refining it, we're building on it, we're always learning. And that's the beautiful thing about life, is that sometimes not having the answer is the most wonderful part about it. It's the mystery of life. Embrace the mystery. Ask the questions. It all starts with, I don't know.
Yeah.
When you can admit that you don't know, you've humbled yourself, and now you have space to learn. But if you know everything, you can't be taught anything.
Yeah,
because you know it all.
Closed-minded.
Yes.
You become. That's the way I feel looking back when I was a fundamentalist. It's like my mind had been shut. I thought I knew everything I needed to know.
Right.
I came to realize after deconstructing that no, that really wasn't the case. I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. And I embraced deconstruction, and I think it's a wonderful thing when you come out of organized, fundamentalist, high control religious environments. I think it's a wonderful thing where you get to know yourself better. And that's one of the things I'm trying to help people with on my channel, if at all possible, is that, they can get to know themselves a little better, because they don't have people telling them what they are, right? Because religion tends to tell us what we are. You are this.
Yes, yes.
And we're very diverse as people.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
So,
We're so different, and everyone has different values. Everyone has different approaches to life that works for them. And the problem is when we try to take our personal approaches to life and we try to make it a legal, we try to legalize it or make other people fall in line with the way we see the world, the way we speak, the way we understand things. You run the risk of becoming authoritarian. Yeah. And that kind of goes against, some of my values, which are to find inner peace. Inner peace is the root of a peaceful society. If people can become peaceful inside, then they're going to relate to themselves and others in a more healthy way, and they're going to in a more genuine way. And right now, though, one thing that I understand is that you can't just tell people to be that way. You can't just tell people, just be kind to each other. Just let's just focus on loving one another. It's like, it's great. This is ultimately what we need. Love is the answer, as the old song says, but it comes off sort of corny and crazy, because we all know as grown adults, that's just not how the world really works. There's a big duality in the world. We were just talking about it before the show. Polarization. People love polarization, polarizing figures. They love that stuff. They love the action. They love the entertainment value of it. They love the cognitive bias that it fills for people. If you're a liberal or a conservative, you've got this guy that's just telling you everything that just satisfies your bias. It's like, wow, I love this guy. And then what you've done with that dualistic way of thinking is now you've created the other. Now you've got the other team, and we don't like the other team. We have to do everything in our power to hurt the other team, and not just politically, not just through ideas, but even physically. We have to hurt them. We have to kill them. We have to wipe them out. That's how far this stuff goes. And it's not just in American culture. It's in every culture. It's always been, it's history.
Yeah.
We have a history of that, you know? And
yeah, I so much agree with you on that. And I see that, you know, people, human beings have this desire to be on a team, or a, you know, I call it tribal, you know.
yes, tribal
like
thinking.
they, you know, identify, I'm this, you know, I'm in this group. And if you're not in this group, well, you're not with me, you know. And it creates so much of a problem, you know. And
It does.
I
it
wish
really
I
does.
wish I had an answer to it. I don't, you know, but I wish, you know, ideally I wish that all of humanity would be more tolerant towards each other, you know, and not so aggressive or on the war path, you know. I'm gonna beat you, you know. I
Yeah.
wish it wasn't like that, but there's so much of that. And I see that in today's America more than I did even when I was younger. Like I see that more today.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. And my thought about that is that because we as a citizenry, as a society, as a culture, we've never been taught to think of things in terms of unification, in terms of seeing others as ourselves. You see, no one looks after anybody else like they look after themselves. Nobody's going to care if I don't get up in the morning and do my daily things that I need to do to take care of my business around my household, pay my bills, take care of my health, take care of my environment. No one's going to care. No one's going to care, because everybody's main priority is them and their family, which it should be. But we're never taught that maybe what we need to do is to embrace one another as if the other person is ourself. Is that possible? Is it possible that I can see you, Lou, as just an extension of myself? How can that happen? How can that be? How can I do that? Can I do it without a God figure, or can I do it without some sort of woo-woo sort of mechanism at play? Like, how can I really wrap my head around actually seeing Brooklyn Lou as an extension of me, that I would care about the same way I care about myself and my kids? How can I foster that mentality? And so I've given that a lot of thought, and you know, and so I start looking at some of the question. Has this question ever been asked? And of course it has. And it goes back to ancient times, especially mostly in the Far Eastern wisdom teachings, right? Where you have the ideas of duality and non-duality. It's like, first of all, let's recognize that we live in a dual world. You know, there's this thing and there's that thing. There's up, there's down. There's good, there's bad. We have to understand that. That's the appearance. That's the way the universe comes to us. It appears to us in that sort of dichotomy. But that dichotomous thinking is unrealistic, as it turns out, because actually the world is less black and white as we may think. There's like a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of connections that we're not even aware of. Every sort of branch has a history, and that history goes back to a common ancestor, you might say, as an analogy, right? So every way that we behave, even we as humans, we all go back to some common ancestor that connects us all together. Even the physical world, even the freaking universe goes back to a common origin, right? And we're all sort of entangled in that way. And so it leads people to think that there's this non-dual reality. But do we have access to that non-dual? We have so much access to the appearance of this duality, this illusion of duality, if you will, but it doesn't seem like we have much access to this non-dual, unified sort of reality, do we? But actually, as it turns out, we do. We actually do. It's actually like the nose on our face, And we're so busy looking for God. We're so busy looking for religion. We're so busy looking for this and that we're missing it. And it's right in front of us. And it's accessible at any moment in life. At any time, you can get in touch with this oneness that we all share that can foster that. And so I've started to practice what I call non-dual practices. And this is just a time during the day. Each day I have a special time, usually before bed or early in the morning, where I just sit back and I get in touch with that side of us. And you can do it too. Anybody can do it. It's very, very easy. It doesn't require belief. It doesn't require a God. It doesn't require magic. It doesn't require any of that. All it requires is for you to pay attention and be still. If you can just be still for some time and let your mind flow, go back, meditate, just think, you can get in touch with what I call the stage. So like we perform on a stage. You know how you got guys that they're putting on a show. They do it because they're on a stage that allows them to act in everything. Now, everything on the stage goes through changes. There's the good guy, the bad guy, the point of the story, but the stage, it always remains the same. It's always just there. And you, within you, is that stage. It's that observer part of you. It's that part that gets to look and observe all of your actions, all of your worries, all of your good times, bad times, and everything in between. But guess what? Your feelings may get hurt. Your body may get hurt. All that's terrible. But this stage never changes. It's almost like it's not affected because it's where all of those feelings exist within. So somebody may say, well, that seems kind of esoteric. I don't see the practicality in it. What's good for? What is it good for? Well, that seems to be the case at face value until you actually practice it. Until you actually do that and you go within yourself and you start observing this part of you, this stage part, this observer, this always never changing, you start to notice something about your life. It's not even a game. You start to become more peaceful. You start seeing people as the same as you. You become more calm. I mean, I'm only speaking from my experience, but I'm also speaking from what people tell me and where I learned it from. This is what people told me was going to happen, and it did happen. And this, like I said, it requires no beliefs. You just do it. It's a practice. And, it's that and other things. But, I mean, all of these things are just there to help. They're tools. They're just tools to help you to open up and find this inner peace. And here's the point to all that. When you have this inner peace, then the noise, all the stuff that you can't control, you don't worry about that so much. It doesn't really affect you in the same way. It's like you can see it, you can observe it, and you can let it go. And you can still treat the other team or whatever just as you, as an extension of you. And just imagine if everybody could really understand this sort of practice, this sort of inner science, right? If everybody could actually get involved in this, what a world, the world, in my mind, I couldn't see the world as being the way it is today. It would have to be more unified. It would have to be more caring, more interested in each other's well-being. The world that I want to see, because you asked the question, what sort of world would we want? I would want a world where we all treat each other the same, where there is no, tribes. It's just us. We're all in it together. I shouldn't have to, my success, your success is not an infringement on me. So when I see a person who's given certain things, like, I don't know, what do people get mad about? Welfare or something, well, they're just taking our tax money, they're benefiting from my hard work while they don't have to do anything. Well, you don't understand that person's situation. You don't understand what's going on. And what does it matter? Why does that matter? What's more important to me is the well-being of these people, of anybody. But I also believe that what helps you encourage inner peace is self-accountability. So you have to be self-accountable. you have to take accountability for your experiences in life.
Yeah.
So what that means is I can't be on this blame game. I can't be in this victim mentality if I'm ever going to have and achieve inner peace. I have to understand that I have some agency in my life. I have some sort of control to some extent. And we all are given the cards we're dealt, granted, but we still have some measure of control, some measure of accountability, and we can overcome it and transcend it. We just have to get into the practice of loving ourselves and seeing our own inner power and seeing that we can be a force for good, not just for us and our family, but for the entire community. If we can all start to feel that way, we can increase our inner peace and we can become a force for good, and we can be an unstoppable country.
Now, I got to ask you, did you learn this from somebody else, or did you develop this mindset on your own?
Well, I always say that learning is always a personal process. Like no one ever really teaches you things. You always kind of teach yourself. People can plant seeds and ideas, but you're not really going to learn whether it's true or not unless you teach yourself these things. And the only way you're going to teach yourself is to actually practice on your own and be honest with yourself and grow and progress and observe it. You know, it's like for me, I kind of like listen to a lot of different wisdom teachers over the years. I'd say this whole journey of mine probably started around 2010, here and there. You know, I was still young, still wanting to go to the club, do things. It was really not on my mind. But then sometimes I'd have that inclination to study it. Then as you get older, it becomes more of a regular practice, more of a regular thing. You're paying attention to people. So I was listening to all these different, you know, teachers about these things, you know, Rupert Spira. I would listen to everybody, Deepak Chopra, scientists, people that would come out and talk about the psychology of the brain, how the brain works, how do people find homeostasis? How do you find balance in life? And I started listening from different viewpoints from everybody, even religious people. I would listen to some of what they say. And some of the commonalities, like this perennial sort of philosophy where you kind of find truth in all these different traditions and stuff. And I was aware of it. I was intellectually aware of it. But because of my situations, I was working like 2-3 jobs in a hard marriage, you know, at that point in time, kids. I was really distracted with a whole lot of things. But then once, for the last, I would say 4 years, almost 5 years, since I moved here to Florida, I've had a chance to really put into practice what I know and really drill down into it and make it an everyday thing that I progress on. And so for the last 4 or 5 years, I think I've just really taught myself. I just kind of took what I had learned all over the years and sort of just put it into practice, you know, the meditation, the practice of being still, not even through meditation. Sometimes you can just be at work and just be still, things of that nature, and just practicing compassion, practicing mercy of people. When I see a homeless person, go out of your way. I know I might not have much money, or I might just give it anyways. Just try to get out of your comfort zone and do something that will make you feel good when you go home at the end of the day. And just doing that and forcing myself to get into that mode of thinking sort of got me into this more inner peaceful place. And then, so I always wondered, so where does that leave God in this whole discussion? Like everything I'm talking about, a lot of religious people were like, well, it sounds like you found Jesus or whatever. It's like, no, not really. Actually, what I've kind of learned through this process, because there was a point in time not too long ago, I was involved in this arguing, debating back and forth. I was even telling you about the debates I'd have with Christians and trying to win these debate things and stuff. And what I've kind of learned through that experience was that when you focus too much on things you can't really prove, like things like God, these unfalsifiable beliefs, and you get attached to these beliefs and these things, you lose peace in your life because you find yourself arguing with people. You find yourself at a, it's us versus them type. You're back to that duality. And so my whole point, and I have to remind myself, my whole point is to get out of that duality and try to be more inclusive and more universal with people and unified with folks, and try to present that sort of face to the world rather than this argumentative face. I don't want to be that argumentative guy to people. Now I want to be a force for unification. I think that's where our country needs to go. And so I've kind of been on this journey of not being attached so much to beliefs. Like, I can care less what a person believes now. I really don't care. Like, if you believe in God or whatever, I don't care. What I'm more concerned with is, how are you treating yourself? How are you treating others? What are you doing for the community? I don't care what you believe. That's inconsequential,
I think you and I are on the same page regarding that sort of stuff. Now, I want to drill down a little bit on your thoughts on what is it. See, what you're describing to me is something I practice. This is something that I consider important in my life, but I don't consider myself, and it's just a matter of words, I guess, spiritual, right?
Yeah.
Because when I think of spiritual, I think of a person, like spirits, like a demon, an angel, a god, some ghost, and I definitely, as an atheist, I don't believe that. I don't believe in any of that. Right. But I do believe that we need to seek peace of mind. All right. And that's the responsibility of each individual, as we grow up out of childhood, where I think it's important for us to seek peace of mind. Right? Yeah. And that can take different shapes for different people. Right. Because it's not always the same. Right. Now, you don't believe in any gods. Is that correct?
Right. That's right. That's right.
You don't believe there is a God named Jehovah, or a God named Jesus, or
a Holy Spirit, or
Right. So you're an agnostic atheist, but you would use the word spiritual, I think, right? Now, explain like how you see. To me, spiritual is all mental, right?
Yes.
It's mental well-being. It's peace. Wait, when I say peace of mind, right? So like, what do you consider? Like, you obviously think you can be, let's say, an agnostic atheist and still be this word spiritual.
Yes.
So
yes.
Can you define what you mean by that word?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for me, because, I would never want to get into like this no true Scotsman fallacy thinking and really define spirit as this is what it means. It's like, no. For some folks, I won't even use the word spiritual. For some folks, I will, depending on what language resonates with you. I think what's more important is that you're communicating ideas effectively. So I'd never get on the atheist experience and try to explain non-duality using spiritual language. It wouldn't work, because the whole thing is it's a baggage thing. So you're bringing a lot of unneeded baggage to the conversation. But at the same time, I see sort of a value. I kind of understand what Sam Harris talks about, because Sam Harris is kind of like the same way. Sam Harris says, why do we let religious people monopolize the word? Why, when the original meaning was not how they use it? This whole thing about spirit as a person, place, or thing instead of a verb. The spirit of the town, the spirit of the language. There's a certain spirit to the way that this podcast goes, right? It's this certain momentum, a mental momentum, a cognitive thing. It's really going back to consciousness. And so where spirit sort of applies as something different than, say, just mental activity is because when we think about phenomenal consciousness, we're talking about something that is not physical as we understand physics. You know, there is no evidence for consciousness in the physical world at all. There's only stories and anecdotes, and we all take it for granted because we're conscious. We understand I'm having this experience. I'm seeing things, hearing things, feeling things, and I just grant that you do too. I mean, why not? That's what we do. I even grant that my cats do the same thing. But this is just a belief. It's just an understanding that I've decided that makes sense because I feel it. I know it within myself. It's like Rene Descartes. I think, therefore I am. So if there's one thing that I cannot deny is that I'm having an experience. And this relies on this weird thing we call consciousness. And so that's where the spiritual stuff comes in, because this consciousness thing is really separate. There's really a different concept than, say, the physical world, you know, how the world appears to us, you know, that we've got these concrete items, you know, trees, rocks, things that we can measure objectively. We can all share in it. We can all say, look, there's the moon. It's white. It's in the sky, you know, blah, blah, blah. These are concrete appearances. Upon closer inspection, it may not be what our language describes it as. You know, science always talks about, well, it's just a bunch of particles and fields and things like that. It's not really a moon, you know, it's not really this thing. It's just how we experience it. And we can even build science around this appearance, and we can make predictions on our appearances and how we perceive the world. We can actually build a science around it. But then fundamentally, as we dig deeper, these things are not as our consciousness. We have no access to it. And that level, you know, quantumly, we have no access to things. They're, you know, like they say, the stuff that we call stuff is non-stuff when you get to a certain level of reality. So solidity, colors, all of these sort of things, they're sort of like user interface illusions, useful fictions, if you will. Our consciousness, however, is the real experience of these things. You know, we really experience temperature. We really experience solidity, all these things. This is consciousness. This is what consciousness does for us. This weird thing that's not accessing reality as it is the ontology. It's just accessing an appearance, how it appears to all of us as a species. And so spiritual kind of comes in because if you think about, you know, how we feel about life, you know, how do we interpret life? What kind of meaning do we find? All of that can play a part in that. All of that's very, very, very informative. If you really think about it, I wouldn't have time now to kind of go into it, but it really gets deep, and it really kind of sheds light on the nature of consciousness itself and the value that we have to sort of recognize it. And then all the other things, like this non-duality thing. This non-duality thing is not intuitive. It's not what we really see in the world. We don't really see a lot of non-duality. We see mainly duality, don't we? You know, and so how can we transcend this duality in order to get to this unification that we're all trying to get to? Well, you have to kind of go into your consciousness and understand how these things work and apply it. And this is sort of I would call, like, for lack of a better word, a spiritual journey, or you might call it a psychological journey. You know, I would say the two are.
That would be me.
Yeah, like I always say that, like the other word, the other word for spirit is psychology. It's our psychology. Yeah. It's psyche. Psyche is based on the word psyche, which is a Greek word for spirit.
Yes, and we're using words to define things that the word itself might bring a different image to a person than what you might intend it to mean, right? Like as a hardcore atheist guy, it's like when someone says spiritual, it's like,
yeah, you just tune out at that point. It's like,
right?
why even?
I think it goes off, but I totally relate to what you're saying, and I totally relate to, you know, the things you're describing. I completely relate to. It's like I want to tell you a story that happened yesterday. Right, I went to a Juneteenth celebration, and it was in my town, and it was the day after Juneteenth, but they were having the event in my town, and there was a church there who was doing a lot of the music, and it was a Black spiritual church, you know, that was doing most of the music, and most of the people there obviously were Christians because they were kind of sensing and relating to the church. And the church mentioned God and stuff like that. But throughout their message and throughout the event, I felt a real warmth from these people. You know, I felt that they were people who understand the value of being free, you know, and the whole history of the Black community in America, and, you know, having to fight for freedom. And I really felt it, you know, and it was something I could relate to. So that was like brought a tear to my eye, you know, just understanding and feeling what they were feeling in this celebration they were having, you know?
Yes.
And I think some people might call that spiritual.
Yes.
Right. But I just use a different word.
Doesn't matter.
I say, you know, it was something psychological for me, you know? It was something humans, my mind connected to, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, there's empathy, like that word. Empathy, I think, can be considered spiritual in a sense, right? I mean, and yet, is it really spiritual? I mean, that gets into like really a question of how the brain functions, you know.
Well, it's a failure of language, you know. It's the artifact of dualistic thinking. So, like, I would rather just say that it doesn't matter what the words are. We're talking about the same thing. So, spirit, psychology, whatever you want to call it, it's this non-physical reality. It's this, you know, when we talk about the will, like this will to live, this will to evolve, this in nature. Nature's just doing what nature does through each and every one of us. And a lot of what it's doing is not necessarily physical stuff. It's just mental stuff. It's conceptual. And so these are two different categories in our language, but that doesn't mean that they're two different categories in reality. In reality, it's just nature. It's all just reality. It's just one thing. We like to compartmentalize things to organize our thoughts. So it is necessary. You know, how are we ever going to distinguish and define words if we don't have opposites? You know, all definitions are based on opposites. And so we need this sort of dichotomous language. But it's also a limitation. It limits us. It sort of creates a lot of its own little problems too, because then we have a breakdown in communication where another person, I may feel this magic of life that maybe you do too, but I may describe it as this spiritual experience where you're going to say, oh, it's not a spiritual experience. It's just you're psychologically reacting to whatever. Yeah. Why not? It's all, who cares what it is, how you describe it. What's important is what actually happened and what was the impression? What did it lead to? You know, did it lead to something positive? Did it lead to a value? You know, did your values sort of get quantified through it? Sure. Great. Then that's the whole thing. That's what's really important. It's not really important what language we use, or, you know, because language are just like pointers. They're not the thing in itself. You know, actually, that's the thing about consciousness, is that consciousness is ineffable because it's private. You know, even if I was to tell you something you experience yourself too, like I say, we both went out to the beach today. Let's say I took me and you, we drove out to the beach and we had a great time. Oh, the beach was beautiful, wasn't it? Oh yeah, I agree, it was. Well, we didn't experience the same beach. I can guarantee you that, because you're a different person. You have different genes, you have different brain, you have a different body, you have a different viewpoint, you have a past that's different than mine. There's so many different things going on with you, Lou, as a person, that's going to create, but it's still beautiful to you for whatever reason. And it's still beautiful for me for whatever my reasons are. We have enough commonalities to see beauty in it. But it's ineffable because we can only describe it as beautiful. What the fuck does that mean? Like, it, you know, what's beautiful to one is not beautiful to another. So it's all very subjective and private. And this is that non-physical, non-quantitative thing that I'm talking about, which kind of points to a spiritual experience or psychological experience, because your psychology is what it is because of all those factors I just went through. And it doesn't really matter. You know, what matters is we had something positive, you know, we had something beautiful, you know, and that's just the best way we can describe that, you know?
Yeah. And I totally relate to that, Scott. All right. As a hardcore atheist, I can relate to that. You know, I just don't, you know, see any of that as, again, when I think of spirit, I'm thinking of a demon, an angel, a god, you know, and I don't see that. I see this as being human. You know, it's a human experience that we maybe all can share. So I wanted to ask you if this descriptor makes sense to you. Right? Would you identify as a spiritual atheist? And is there such a thing? Because I think there is, and I think it's kind of along the lines of what we're talking about, you know?
Yeah, I would say yes, because I met a Buddhist priest back in 2018 when I was in California, and I was really on my journey. I was just trying to understand a lot of things, and so I just assumed that because he's a Buddhist and he's talking spiritual stuff all the time, and that he believed in God and angels and demons, just like you were saying. Like, I just conflated those terms, you know. And he sat me down at lunchtime and he really explained to me that, no, you know, you've got this Western idea about spirit. You've got this very Western idea about these things. Like, actually, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in these ghosts and spirits as you're describing them. Like, that's not part of my tradition. My tradition is about spiritual stuff. What you're talking about is something else. Like
religious, maybe.
Yeah, like for him, the way that the Christians and stuff, the West usually describe, he doesn't see that as spiritual at all. He sees that as what you guys are into is comic book stuff. You guys have made spirituality into a comic book, like of people that do superhuman things and fly in the sky and all this kind of childish kind of stuff. He goes, that's not spirituality, dude. That's not spirit. Spirit that has nothing to do. You're describing science fiction. Like, we're not about that. We're about mentality, psychology, you know, healthiness of mind, and you know, this is what it meant for way before Christianity and Judaism was even established. We were talking about spirits and stuff like that. Spiritual language meant something totally different than the way you guys have hijacked the word. And now I can't even talk about this stuff without people like you coming along and straw manning me and making it seem like I'm into magic and shit. That's not really what it's about. So when he really broke it down that way, he helped me understand, and he kind of led me in another direction in life. And I kind of like, well, oh, okay. Now I started to kind of put it together, and really now I'm kind of like trying to reclaim words and reclaim just for communication purposes, because in a way, like if atheists are so embedded in the Western, knowledge of what spirit means, I won't even use the word. But if I'm speaking to someone who's like a Christian who sees spirit as the demons and the angels and stuff, then I'll use that language, but I will apply it into a more realistic way, like to what we understand to be true, the facts. So I'll say, yeah, spiritually, and then they resonate better. It's like you'll be really surprised how powerful the words you choose to use can be in conveying ideas. Even if the words are not necessarily the way they understand them, they at least open the door. That you've got an ear now, like, because you're talking their language. It's like, oh, he's talking about spiritual stuff. Okay, I'm open now. I'm open. I don't care if you're an atheist. You said spirit, so I think we've got something we can talk about. And so I'll just say, well, spirit is and usually they understand it just like you do. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. And so now we can talk about the angels and the demons and the gods and stuff, and we can get into that discussion, and we can start breaking those terms down and do a history lesson on where did you get these ideas from. And we can start talking in a different level, and that makes the communication a lot easier because we're on the same page. So if I'm with an atheist, or a skeptic that doesn't want to entertain that word, they call it in philosophy word phobia. Like there's just, God is, some people are just phobia. They have a phobia against the word God.
Or a trigger,
or it triggers them. Yeah, that's right. It's a trigger. It's like you start talking spirits and stuff, they tune right out. They don't respect the conversation anymore because you're kind of talking out of their, knowledge set or out of their context. So you want to kind of meet people where they are with your language and be more effective. Because for me, the goal is just to find unification. It's to find where can we meet, where can we build. When we meet here, can we build into a different place? And I had a lot of atheists and Christians, believe it or not, come on board. Like they kind of understand what I'm saying, and it's like they're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I like non-duality. That's the main thing. Like for me, I like, as you know, I think when I was on that show with you the first time, I kind of talked about idealism, which is a non-dualistic sort of framework for understanding unification. And that's what I was talking about on your show that day. And I was really breaking down idealism, but really that's not even that important to me. Like even idealism is just a philosophical, metaphysical point of view. What's really important to me is that we get on board with this non-dualism, whether you're a materialist or a idealist or whatever, we can still embrace non-duality. That's the main important thing. Can we embrace this non-dichotomous thinking together and start seeing, we can start looking at other practices like paraconsistent logic. Can we talk about paraconsistent logic? Because a lot of people will say, well, the rules of logic are A cannot be B, A cannot be not A at the same time and in the same sense. That seems pretty obvious at face value. But guess what? That's not really true. As it turns out, there's other forms of knowledge, other forms of logic, other frameworks where that doesn't really apply. Quantum logic, paraconsistent logic. There's other ways we can talk about it. And that's just an expansive, that all that's doing is expanding your view to non-duality. It's creating this non-dual, and all of that fosters unity and love and acceptance and tolerate. Even if you don't believe what I believe about metaphysics or ontology, that doesn't matter. What we need to really get with is that we can all coexist without this sort of tribalistic sort of dichotomous thinking. We can see that, yeah, on his framework, it's logical, but on mine, it's not. But who cares? We all choose our axioms. We all choose our frameworks. And we all resonate with different frameworks and different that's why we're all different people. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But we do need to kind of unify on one thing. We do need to unify on the fact that we are a one people. We have a common ancestry, all of us. We all bleed the same. We all breathe the same. We are the same thing, at the end of the day. And that's the beauty that we need to really embrace, that part.
Isn't that pretty much, I mean, I don't get totally into how the definition of secular humanism, but I always tend to identify with it. Yeah. I'm a humanist. Yeah. I want the best for humanity, just in its simplest form, right? And isn't that along the lines of humanism?
Yes, it is. And even outside of humanism, it's even embracing objects. It's even embracing the animal kingdom. It's embracing the known and the unknown. It's really just bringing everything together into a unified mentality. So yeah, if you think about it, like if you understand that you are nature, you're not outside of nature, you're one with nature, you're just part of it, then wouldn't it behoove us to treat the environment better? Yes. Wouldn't it be more healthy for us to look at our environment as something we depend on rather than something we are here to cause dominion over, like the Christians say, like we have dominion over the earth? No, we don't. Like, any hurricane, any earthquake will tell you you don't have dominion over anything. So
yeah, I want to tell you a personal story just in my own life. I never was into animals when I was like a fundamentalist Christian. I just looked at animals, and it's obviously not everyone thinks like this. It was just my thoughts, I used to look at animals as just inferior, something that humans were to control and dominate over, right? And I didn't see any link, like I didn't connect, living animals to humans, because I didn't think I was an animal, right? Mm-hmm. I thought I was set apart, I was special, right? Mm-hmm. But as an atheist, I came to appreciate animals so much more. I really do. Like, I really appreciate, looking at animals and seeing how they do have emotions or feelings. They're not advanced intellectually or cognitive like we are, but we're an advanced mental animal is how I view it now. But they have a lot of the senses we have, and they have a lot of the feelings we have. So it's interesting, because I used to have a dominionist type of view. Well, they're just here to, we got to, they're here for us to eat. They're here for us to use, that sort of thing. And I don't really think like that anymore. So I think it's helped me to become more non-dualistic.
That's
of the animals.
Yeah, that's a non-dualistic sort of approach. So you're seeing the commonality, you're seeing the connection to the animal world, and it's true. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We are animals. We are just a different. This is all just language. Reality just is what it is, and science can help us, can help show how we are interrelated genetically. You can see it in so many different ways, and it's a beautiful thing. And it should foster an attitude about the world, that we should take care of this world. This is a world that we emerged from. This is something that we are part of intimately. and we rely on, and it's not just the earth, it's everything in the cosmos. Our sun feeds us light and photons and helps photosynthesis, which also helps the earth breathe and gives us the breath of life, and we emerge out of that. And water and all of these things can come out of these systems, complex systems that derive themselves from other systems. The stars all sort of created this huge furnace of products of the universe, these different contents that created who we are, that we're also made of all of these sort of contents as well. And when you look at it in that big picture, that really high picture, you see that how you start to understand the nature of reality a little bit. You start seeing that everything, the only thing constant is this energy just changes form all the time, and it just creates these episodes of life and stages, and then it evaporates and changes form into this other thing, and nothing has any sort of precedence over anything else. It's just, that's what we think. We think we're important. We think we're so special over the animals and the earth and the universe. It's like, no, dude, you're just a small speck, a small part of this universe. You're just a small expression of what the universe is doing through you. And so the way that I look at things is that, the more we understand this sort of non-dualistic way of thinking, the more we're going to be more prone to care for our universe. We're going to be more prone to care for each other. And we're going to see that, we are nature, and we should, we can do that. Now, there's a lot of people that just simply don't value the same things we do, though. There's a lot of people that don't value, they just want to see the world burn. There's people that just want to see each other burn. And all of this is because I think it's all born of dualistic thinking. It's because they see others as a projection of the self-hate that they have for themselves. They see they don't really care for themselves. And so why should they have any motivation at all in caring for others, or their own, or the generations after they die, or the earth, or anything like that? There's no value there. It's because they see themselves as something that's a piece of crap. Like a lot of religious people, unfortunately, say they were born sinners, and we're all just, what do they call it, dirty rags or whatever.
Our righteousness is as filthy rags.
Filthy rags, yeah. And that's not, I can't see that.
Very downer type of thing.
Yeah. Such a downer.
So,
yeah.
Let me ask you something, Scott. Two things I'm curious about. Back when you were a Jehovah Witness and you met someone who kind of started, making you think, all right, was there anything that you recall that was like a pivotal thought where you said, wait a second, maybe this isn't true? Is there anything you recall that came to you where you're like, hey, wait a second, this is probably not true?
Yeah. So I was confronted with the idea of the virtue of selfishness, which I thought was kind of an oxymoron. I thought it was very opposed to the Christian teaching. It was opposed to my teaching. And I rejected it. But then when I read through it, the virtue of selfishness, I started understanding that what that meant was, when you have self-love, then you can also express that love to others. It makes it more natural to love others and the world around you. But when you look at yourself in a demeaning way, then you have no motivation to love others or anything else. So when I really read through it, and I read it again and again and again, it started clicking with me. And I'm like, you know what? This is absolutely right. And I could see it even within the behavior within my Kingdom Hall, with people who saw themselves in a low light, like, I'm crap, I deserve to be destroyed, but thanks to belief in Jesus, Jehovah will save me, but that's the only reason why. And then I looked at the way these people live their life, so hypocritical. They had so much anger, so much different personal problems, yet they were out knocking on doors and teaching the message because they were just doing what they were encouraged to do. Like, this is the best you can do with it, man. You're right. You're exactly right. You are a piece of crap, just like we all are. So the best you can do is follow orders.
Now, how is your mental well-being after religion?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't really have anything to go to. So I kind of bought into this idea, like, Jesus asked his disciples, well, if you don't, what did he say? If you don't want to follow me, go your own way or whatever. And they said, oh, but Lord, where shall we go?
Yeah, I remember the verse well.
Yeah.
It was something along the lines of, well, where can we go? You have all the answers. Like,
yeah. And people used to tell me all the time, like, if you leave the truth, we used to call it the truth. Yeah. So if you leave the truth, you're going to destroy your life, because then you're going to go to what is available, which is drugs. You're going to become an alcoholic. You're going to be involved in a lot of sex, and you're probably going to get a disease. And you're going to think it's fun for now, but you're going to learn Jehovah was right all along, that it leads to, we had people all the time give their testimony. Oh, I left the truth back when I was a teenager, and I was like the prodigal son. I went out into the world and I enjoyed the best of what the world had to offer, but Jehovah was right all along. That stuff is shallow. It leads to nowhere, but all of this stuff. And now I just came back to the truth, because I knew this is where I belong. Being out there in the world is cold and uncaring. And yeah, you can do drugs and you can do alcohol, but it comes with its own price. You keep dealing with the devil like that, you're gonna pay the price, and you're gonna suffer. And you'll be even lucky if you can get out of it and come back to the truth. And so I kind of like had this going on in my head the whole time. I'm like thinking, yeah, but I don't have good reasons to believe in this stuff anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but my wife at the time used to always tell me, yeah, but if you leave the truth, you're going to go right into the same behaviors you went into before, violence and, a lot of crazy stuff, drugs and this and that. And so why would you even want to, better? Why would you want to put yourself through that? You've got a loving family. You've got a loving kingdom hall of family here that loves you and cares for you and wants to take care of you. And you've got a wife who's also one of Jehovah's servants, here to be your wife and serve you and give you everything you need. What is it about out there that you need so bad? You've already been there. So these things used to fuck with my head. Yeah,
right. And isn't it like a real mental trap that they set? Right? They get you to think that you need the religion. You need them.
It's an abusive relationship. Yeah,
it's crazy. I mean, when I think about what it does to a mind, the mentality of someone who's caught in that, it becomes everything to them. And to me, it's very sad, because I see the world without religion as being so much better. I think of myself as a better person now, and as a happier person. Yeah. So that's what I'm wondering. Like, after it's all said and done now, where you're at now, I mean, do you feel like you made the right decision leaving, Jehovah's Witnesses?
I pray to the God I don't believe in every day and say thank you for being able to leave, because I would hate to think that I'm still involved at my age into that and have never experienced the things, my journey. Like, my journey is everything. Like, it's my life. It's my story. It's what happened to me, this self-narrative thing. And that gives me a lot of self-reflection. And so without that, I would still be an automaton. I'd still be a robot, just following orders, just believing out of fear, out of ego, and all of the things that religion provides you with. It's just to say your ego can live forever in heaven or on earth forever, or wherever your religion tells you you're going. It's one of those things that soothes the ego. Your ego, yourself, is going to live forever because it's so important to nature that your ego survives forever.
I think what's wonderful is, to me, what I find beautiful is that your story is yours. Because I think the religious story is not yours. When you're in that religion, in the high controlled environment, it's not your story. It's like you're given a story. They all tell the same story. It's like, and what's beautiful is that we can be individuals. And we could think and have, I just call it free thought. We could think for ourselves. And that's, like, to me, what freedom is, because we can be controlled, right, by forces outside of ourselves. Like, we could live in a country that's fascist and they might control us, and there can be a clampdown where we are crushed, all right, and we could even be abused physically. We could be put in prison, all right. But the one thing we have that's valuable to me, it's the most valuable thing in my life at this point in my life, is freedom of thought. At least you can't take that from me, right? Right. Because you can lock me in a cage, but you can't take my freedom to think away.
Right.
Until you kill me, right?
Right.
Up until then, I can still have a freedom. And when I talk about freedom, that to me is the ultimate freedom. That's when you speak of peace of mind. We could have peace of mind regardless of where we're at, whether we're in a literal prison or we're in a beautiful beach, we could still have peace of mind. And that's what my life's journey is about, is establishing peace of mind for myself, and then trying to help others find peace of mind. That's pretty much, what I'm really about when it gets to those deeper thoughts, outside of just, arguing with Christians, right? Outside of that, it's like, if I could help someone have peace of mind and I could have peace of mind, then I make the world a little better place.
Absolutely.
That's how I see it.
Absolutely. It's what I call it's actually what I don't call it. It's traditional, but it's called the principle of unattachment. So in Buddhism, when you're attached to beliefs, you are not free. You've attached yourself to some people or a belief system or an organization or some concept, like, say, God or demons or devils or some fear. When you're attached to beliefs, you are in prison. You have put yourself in a prison, because now you can only move. You're limited in your movement as far as your thinking is concerned. You can only think within a certain, like in a box. That's your prison right there. You've created a box for yourself, and you'll never really find peace, because the nature of consciousness is to always expand. It's always trying to have a new experience, a new knowledge base, a new thing. It's always looking for novelty. That's what consciousness does. Its whole thing is to expand. But when you put yourself in these little belief boxes, you can't expand. And so this leads to what the Buddhists call suffering. So this attachment leads to suffering. And that's what religious people go through all the time, is that they don't maybe admit it or recognize it for what it is. They just think that they're suffering because that's just the hell on earth that God made for them. But actually, no, it's of their own self-making. They've put themselves in this little dichotomous box, And then because they're in this box, they go through this cognitive dissonance. They'll start hearing different information. They'll start seeing different truths of the world that conflict with their attached beliefs, the beliefs that they're married to, that they can't do anything about. It's like, I can't give this belief up because I was told, or this fear or whatever. And then that chains them like a slave into that mentality, and they cannot move out of it. And so they just have to put up with the cognitive dissonance. They'll know things to themselves that ain't right. I know I did. When I was a Jehovah Witness, I'd see all kinds of stuff that didn't make sense to me. I could never understand. One of the things that really caused me a lot of problems was this whole thing about the Adam and Eve story. Like, I could never understand, like, wait a minute, God created the animals before the people, the Adam and Eve, but he punished the Adam and Eve with death and sin and all this stuff. Well, what about the animals? Because why do they have to suffer? Yeah, and they were suffering even before, they were dying off even before Adam and Eve. So what did they do that caused them to suffer unnecessarily and die and stuff? Like,
you'll never get a real good answer about that. Yeah, because the answers that are given, just they're not very good.
Yeah, and then the other thing that was really bothering me was this whole nature of Jehovah. Like, they kept telling me, well, Jehovah knows everything. He's omniscient. He's all powerful. He knows what you're going to do even before you do it. Like, we used to always go back to that scripture. God saved you even before the founding of the world. Like, even before God created anything, he knew you were going to be saved or not saved. And I used to always have a problem with that, because I was always like, well, wait a minute. If we have free will, yet God knows everything we're going to do, well, where's the free will in that? Yeah. So that was another one that I didn't understand too much.
There's another one right there. Free will and the sovereignty of God. You will never get a really good answer, because it doesn't make sense.
No, it just really doesn't.
Totally sovereign and in control of everything, and then also give you free will, because there's something in there that is directly contradictory. So you'll just hear like people dance around all that, right?
Yeah.
They'll give you some philosophy that doesn't ultimately satisfy if you're really, a deep thinker,
Right. And, a lot of philosophers traditionally kind of held to the idea of compatibilism over determinism and free will. I think like most academic philosophers anyways would say that we're compatible with free will, but we're not truly we're not libertarian free willers. In other words, we don't have ultimate free will.
Yeah.
We didn't choose like what, time frame we were born into, or culture, or language, or clothes we have to wear. All of this stuff is sort of adopted without even thinking. All of this uncontrolled stuff sort of determines you where you are and who you are. And so it's more the way that I kind of came to terms with it is like, well, we're just the doings of nature. Nature is expressing itself through us. So it seems like we have free will because we don't actually know what we're going to do. But at the end of the day, nature is determined to do what it's going to do, because there's certain laws, there's physical laws that are regular patterns of laws. And there's a certain, randomness, at the very bottom level of reality, like quantum mechanics or whatever is built based on randomness. But once you get to a certain point in reality, it starts to become more deterministic. That's how we can do statistics. That's why we can predict the weather. We can predict things to a certain degree, because to a certain degree, everything is sort of determined. So we are not outside of nature. We're not outside of all of these things. So we are within the causal chain. So what we experience in our consciousness is what it's like to be this localized process of nature, which I think is beautiful. We're kind of like on a ride, We're kind of like experiencing a ride in nature, you know.
I think the way you've come to think about these things is far more beautiful than religion.
Absolutely.
Right. I just find it to be much more deeper, more profound, and more special and more beautiful than religion, you know. So, you know, I'm happy to have you on, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, you know, because you're a deep thinker. And I have one last question, and then I want you to tell everyone where you can be found. Gotcha. The last question is, given what's, you know, the environment today in our country, what would you like to see over the next 10 years that may make America a better country? And you don't have to go all in depth, but just
yeah.
Way.
I mean, ultimately, I would like everyone to find inner peace and to treat each other the way they would like to be treated. And I would like to live in a society that that has that same value, that core value. We would need to get that core value. How we get there, I don't really know. The only thing I can say is that I wish people would be more less divisive in their language and more inclusive. Like I wish, like you do, like you have these great conversations with religious people and you try to find some common ground. I wish people could be more like that. Rather, like, I know it's fun to debate. People love polarization. I mean, Donald Trump, he's a very polarizing figure, but he's also the one most voters elected this time because they like that. People like that crap for some reason. They love that dichotomy. It's a game, the game of life. But I think that if we really look at this situation, it's getting to a point where authoritarianism is a real issue that we can possibly fall into, where we won't have peace of mind, nobody, because we're going to be slaves to what we can think, what we can read, what we can value. And when we take away those things, we're headed towards a dystopian society, especially in light of the technology that we have coming out, like this artificial intelligence. That's sort of we're right in the middle of this changeover into this, you know, wild, wild west frontier with technology. And unless we really get our story straight, unless we understand what our values are, we're going to be left to the whims of whoever's in charge. And if we've got some authoritarian in charge who doesn't care about sicking the government or sicking the National Guard on people for whatever reason, or controlling what we can read, what we can say. And this goes for the left too. I mean, there's a lot of extremists on that end too. They want to tell you what you can think and what you can't. They'll say, you can't talk this way because it's offensive, or you can't really read this because we don't want people to know about that. You know, you're taking away people's right to be autonomous and to really think about things the way they choose to. Like, you know, and control people's language, and it takes away people's accountability, because it's like, you're not letting people decide how to be accountable. You're just making them be accountable according to your standards, which might not be everybody's standard. And so we just have to come together and start to respect each other. And we have to be self-reliant, and we have to understand, as long you can swing your arms out as far as you want, just don't hit other people in the nose, man. You know,
I'm with you, Scott. Totally.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds very liberal, but I mean, it is.
No, I mean, I'm with it. That's where I'm at. I mean, that's what I would like to see. And I think that fundamentalist religion holds that back. You know, it holds us back from that. That's one of the reasons I'm on YouTube. I want to give a differing voice.
That's right.
Because so many people are under, you know, the authority of fundamentalist religions in our country, you know, and I just want to give a differing opinion on all that, and try to open people up to thinking for themselves.
Bingo. Because it's rooted in your thinking. That's right.
Oh, of course.
The fundamentalist thinking is what you need to attack. Like, not even just like those are the symptoms, like seeing these evangelical churches sprouting out or whatever, or the woke crowd that comes and tells you what you can and can't say or think. Those are just symptoms of a much larger problem, rooted problem, which is fundamentalist thinking.
Right.
You know, and that's what you're really trying. I see that you're really trying to address, and you're just using religion as the example and kind of the vehicle to expose that kind of thinking, because it's so prevalent and easy to see with religion. It's not so easy to see in other ways, because a lot of these people do that kind of authoritarian stuff in the name of freedom of thought and stuff like that. Because whose thought are they really talking about? They're talking about their thoughts, not yours. You want freedom of the way I think, not the freedom for the way you think. You know, and even conservatives, I hear them do the same thing. It's like, yeah, we're just standing up for freedom. You know, we should have the right to stop women from having an abortion or whatever.
We should have the right to put you down.
Yeah, that's right. That's it in a nutshell. Exactly.
So Scott, to finish up, just tell us where anyone watching can find you. I'm going to drop the link for your channel down below, man. And just tell everyone about your channel and where they can find you.
Right. So the name of the show is The Discussion, and it's with myself, Scott Williamson, and Sophia, and she's my co-host. And we, you know, the whole format of the program is I purposely and intentionally seek out people that disagree with me on at least something, and I try to get them to come on and have an open, honest discussion without any feelings being hurt, without any abusive language or anything like that. So that's the challenge, is I like to get people to disagree with, and I'll bring up topics like metaphysics, philosophy of mind, philosophy, science, religion, because that's kind of the background that I came from. So I like to talk about those subjects, and I like people to come in and challenge and have their own views, whether you're a Christian or whether you're something else that doesn't agree, whatever. I'm open to it. I've changed my mind on a lot of different things while I was on the show in real time. So I'm somebody who's open to change his mind. Yeah, so if you like that kind of open conversation, please come on by, man. It's 100% open conversation. Call in. I'll bring you backstage, bring you on, and we just have great conversations. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Scott, I appreciate you coming on. All right, everyone watching, check out Scott's channel. And on this video, like, comment. We love to hear from you. Subscribe to the channel if you like this type of conversations. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you, Lou.
Thanks for coming on.
Yes, sir.